Thank you. Thank you. Well, how are we doing? We're doing okay? I am really grateful for you to be here and thankful for the tremendous work that has been put on this event and just my campaign in general. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but there's a movement happening, and I hope it's not happening too late, but it's certainly happening. People all over are now forced to make a decision, because in the past, the Republican establishment, or the Idaho establishment, because they're the same thing, right, has controlled the Idaho elections for about the last 40 years. And this year is a little different now, because what typically happens, and what has been happening for, like I said, about the last 40 years, given the exception of one governor's race, is that all the conservatives in Idaho who see and know that something is wrong, they all run as Republicans. But the problem has been that the Republican establishment has such a grip on the Republican Party that they make sure that their guy is the only one that makes it through the primaries. And that's a lot of our fault. That's a lot of our fault. But there's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of lack of information, even misinformation that is out there. And so you end up with the one with the most money, the one with the most corporate support, getting through the primaries. And what happens to all the conservative candidates after that? They're all gone. And the people of Idaho go into the general elections with only two choices: the establishment Republican nominee, or the liberal Democrat. And of course, so we say, well, we're going to vote for the lesser of two evils. We have to support, the one that kind of at least looks like he's somewhat conservative. And so that's what we do, because that's all the choice we have. But this year, this election in November, you will have another choice. You will not have to go to the polls, and you will not have to say, well, do I have to vote for an establishment Republican in name only, or the Democrat? You don't have to just make one of those choices. You could actually choose a conservative candidate who loves God, who understands what liberty is. And I say I understand what liberty is because I have had to suffer for it. And it hasn't been easy. This education process that we are all going through, and that I have gone through, it's kind of like the school of hard knocks, right? And it's really the only way to understand these things, because most of the time we don't really contemplate freedom. We know what it feels like. We've experienced it, and we love that experience. We sing about it. We hear others sing about it. We sing the national anthem, and we send our young men and our young women off to defend it. But most of the time, we really don't understand what it is, like actually what it is, and how rare it is, and how important it is to protect and to defend. And we have gotten to the place where almost around the entire world, that freedom is almost non-existent. And most of us, and most of the people around the world, don't even know that. Because I would like to define freedom for you. Freedom is the ability to do whatever you want, as long as you are not infringing upon your neighbor's rights. That is freedom. The ability to do whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. So tell me, where in the world can we find freedom? Tell me. Tell me where we can find true freedom. Because right here, even in Idaho, right here, think about the freedom to control your property. Are you losing that freedom? So what is the definition? The ability to do whatever you want with your property as long as you're not infringing upon your neighbor's rights? Are we losing that freedom? If that is the definition of freedom, then we are losing it. We're losing it in every little county, every little town, in these large cities, in the municipalities, on every level. We are losing that. In our state, we are losing the ability to control our properties and to just do what we want with it as long as we're not infringing upon our neighbor's rights. We understand that we cannot infringe upon our neighbor's rights. We don't want to infringe upon their neighbor's rights, but we want to be able to do with our property what we want, right? And so that's just one definition applied to private property. Well, what about the freedom to worship? To worship whatever you want, as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights. So you can't force someone to worship with you, or you can't take someone's dog and sacrifice it, right? That's not going to work. But what about if you decide you want to worship God Almighty in the way that you choose, when you choose, and how you choose? And as long as you're not infringing upon somebody's rights, you should be able to do that. And the state and the county and the United States government should protect your right in that. What else is important? What about the freedom to trade? Trade with each other. To freedom to trade, to be able to trade with whoever you want, with whatever you want, as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights. Is that not important? To be able to do that, to have a willing buyer and a willing seller, and you agree to something and you get to trade that. And there's not somebody in the middle of that trying to make a bunch of money off of it so that they can create a force and a power to stop you from worshiping or from doing with your property what you want to do with it, or whatever else may apply to freedom. Freedom to trade is a right. It is a right. And it should be protected as a right. And we should be able to trade with whoever we want as long as we are not infringing upon somebody else's rights. Do you agree with that? So, with the true definition of freedom defined, and if you accept and understand that definition, which is the ability to do whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights, now, with that, you can start identifying who is taking freedom. Who is taking your right to do with your property what you want to, as long as you're not infringing. Who is threatening that? And we can start identifying that. Then we can start fighting against that. Correct? We can start fighting against who? Well, it probably is our cities and our counties in this. Our city officials, our county officials, and saying, look, this is my property. As long as I don't infringe upon my neighbor's rights, I should be able to do what I want with my property. Correct? Or am I correct in that? What about the right to worship? Did you know that Idaho was the first state during all the COVID garbage to arrest pastors for having church outside? Did you know that? In Moscow, Idaho. I used to say Moscow, but they don't like that up there. If they say Moscow, I guess it means, it's a little better. And in that little city up there, 3 pastors decided right in the middle of the COVID lockdowns issued by Governor Little that they would hold a church service outside without masks. And so they assembled as protected. And what happened? What happened? The city police, under the direction of the governor, under the direction of the governor, the city police came and arrested the 3 pastors that organized the church service. One of them that we have video of, they actually stripped the Bible out of his hands so they could handcuff him. My friends, I can't emphasize to you enough what kind of risk we are in. Even here in Idaho, where the right to worship is so clear in our state constitutions that there should be no room whatsoever of molesting in any way anybody who is organizing a worship service or worshiping themselves. None whatsoever. Yet because of a governor's order, the police believe that they're justified and it is their duty to strip the Bible out of a pastor's hands and then handcuff him and take him to jail. And I say, no more in Idaho. No more. This cannot be the Idaho that I love. This cannot be the Idaho that you love. What about Sarah Brady, the mother who was arrested for taking her children to the park? Meridian, Idaho. She takes her children to the park. Imagine that, in Idaho. And a police officer, Meridian police officer, has the audacity to arrest her and book her in the Ada County Jail. And still to this day, it's been about a couple months since I talked to her, but the last time I talked to her, her attorney fees, so they're probably a lot high now, because she has still not made it to trial. What happened to a fair and speedy trial? She still has not made it to the trial, and her attorney fees, as of a couple months ago, were $26,000. Imagine the stress. Imagine the hardship that's placed upon that little family. And her husband's a Boise police deputy, or a detective, excuse me. And so imagine the challenge that's put her and her family through. But she has stood strong, and she has not yielded to this, this tyranny. What else do you call it? What else do you call it? This is your neighbor that this is happening to. And so we can see that even in Idaho, even in this beautiful state, among people who truly believe in freedom, you can see that our liberties and our freedoms are at risk here as well. They are at risk, and we must act, because if a people do not act, then they are acted upon. And I don't want to be a person that's acted upon. Do you want to be a person that's acted upon? No. Do you want our children to be people that are acted upon? No. That cannot act for themselves because there is a force and a power that is acting upon them and is so strong and so terrifying that they can't worship how they want to worship. They can't trade with each other the way they want to trade. They can't control their property, a piece of God's earth that He gave us so that we can live and be safe and secure with. Do we want that in Idaho? I don't want that in Idaho. I don't want it happening here in Idaho. And we see Idaho sliding down a path and going away from its values, going away from freedom. And we've seen this before. Can I have by a show of hands, those of you in the last, let's just say 10 years, that have moved to Idaho? That's a good amount of you. Now, anybody, I'm sure there's people here, you don't have to raise your hand, but there's people here that came from Oregon. And they can tell you a story. I'm sure there's people here that came from state of Washington. I'm sure there's people here that came from California. We hear that all the time, right? There we go. She's even proud of it. What about Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado? Let me tell you, and you can probably tell me, but I'm going to try to tell you what you could tell me. All those states at one time were ultra-conservative states. They were all ultra-conservative, God-fearing states that believed in true freedom and set it forth that a person had a right to do with their property whatever they wanted as long as they didn't infringe upon their neighbors, that they could trade with each other, that they could worship how, when, and where they want. And that their laws and their constitutions, if you've read the constitutions of these states, it is beautiful, beautiful writings. You cannot believe the states are doing what they're doing with the Constitution like they are. Hey, how about a hand for my wife? She's by far the better half. And I wanted her to talk, and she just about flat refused. So these states, their constitutions, they're beautiful. The wording in it is a protection of true liberty, true freedom. And then you see what's going on in the halls of their capitals. And it has nothing to do with liberty or freedom, nothing. And what they did is they went down this path, and I'll explain it the best I can. Because it was a constitution based upon constitutional principles of freedom or true conservatism. Because there's different versions of conservatism, right? But true conservative. And then it became, from there, they moved to republicanism, which isn't a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. When you read the Republican platform, it is a righteous platform. It is a good platform. But they shifted a little bit. And then they went to a perverted version of republicanism. And that's right where Idaho is right now. And then they went to Democrats. And now they're controlled by a leftist agenda that actually is going to completely destroy their states. They cannot survive under this leftist control, this leftist ideology, more like a leftist theology. They cannot survive under that. It will destroy them and their society, their people, and it's happening fast. It's happening rapid. And so where is Idaho? Idaho is in the category, if you will, of the perverted republicanism, where you have Republicans that have controlled the Idaho Senate, House, and Governor's office for almost the last 40 years. The last 40 years. Well, you would think that Idaho would be the most conservative state in the country, but it's not. Why? Why haven't we put forth the Republican platform, which is a good and righteous platform, when we have the Republicans controlling the House, the Senate, and the governor's office for almost 4 decades? Why? It's because they have infiltrated the Republican Party and they have turned it from conservatism to a perverted version of republicanism so they can drive it right into the Democrat and liberal agenda, and that's what's happening in Idaho, and we have to stop it. If we do not, we have great examples. We have 2 bordering states, 3 bordering states actually, that has happened to. And Colorado just happened to them. They did not stop it in time, and now the conservative, the God-fearing people of that state are looking around at each other going, what happened? What happened to our state? How did we lose it? And how do we get it back? Because guess what? There has been no state that has reversed this process. No state that has ever got it back. Because as soon as you start doling out the funds of the state and people become dependent on it, then you cannot get it back. It has to collapse and you have to rebuild. And where do we go if that happens to Idaho? Like was said, this is the last Alamo. Where are we going to go? Like, where do we go? Look around. Where do we go? There might be little pockets, little towns, maybe little counties somewhere, but nothing with a holdout like a state. Idaho is the place that we must stand. Idaho is that place. We must stand. And we must do it for our children. Now, how do we do this? How do we go about doing this? Well, I think it's actually, the framework is quite simple. It is quite simple. And I want to read you the 8 planks of the Keep Idaho plan. Because this plan was designed for the purpose of restoring principled conservative values in Idaho. It was designed for this purpose. It was designed with prayer. It was designed with a tremendous amount of thought. It was designed with a lot of strategy. A lot of strategy because it's not easy, right? I mean, the people that are in control right now are very powerful. And they have tons of resources. And they have convinced the people to stay dumb and to go down once a year and vote R. That's what they've done. When they're not even R themselves. And so we are in a battle. We're in a battle of informing ourselves. And this plan is a plan that we need to understand and implement in Idaho to keep it from becoming the new Oregon or the new California or the new Washington or the new Nevada or the new New Mexico or the new Colorado. So, number 1, the first plank in the Keep Idaho plan. Protect private property. If you do not protect private property, where are you going to go to raise your family? Where are you going to go to have peace? Where are you going to go to worship? Where are you going to go to live and be happy and be satisfied and enjoy and just relax from the rest of the world? Where are you going to go if you can't go to your private property? And if you can't control your property, if it's not yours, then that means somebody else can come onto your property whenever they want. That means somebody else can come into your door, into your home. And believe me, that's what happens. When private property becomes common, that's what happens. Nobody has peace. Nobody has peace. So it is extremely important, and number 1 on the Keep Idaho plan, to protect private property. Number 2, eliminate progressive taxes. You know what's interesting about that, and it really wasn't intended, but I went and read the Communist platform, in the Communist Manifesto, written by Karl Marx. And did you know that number 2 in the Communist Manifesto is to implement progressive taxes? Because if you can tax a people, ultimately you can put them to their knees, and everything again becomes common. Your jobs, your property, your vehicles, your income, everything becomes common. Because if they don't take it at the back end, they'll just take it on the front end. So eliminating progressive taxes. Number 3, freeing Idaho from federal control. Idaho, as we stand right now, for the last 38 years has not been able to pay its own bills. 36% of our income, if you will, comes from the federal government. 36%. That's right. How in the world are we going to be independent? How are we going to be able to make our own decisions? How are we going to be able to, stand on our own if 36% of our budget is required to come from the federal government. Now, why is that so? Well, as the old timers here know, that land and the natural resources is where all wealth comes from. And yet, the federal government, who clearly knows and understands this, is controlling 61% of Idaho's land and 72% of our subsurface mineral rights. So boo, right? So we cannot generate wealth in Idaho that is ours, that was intended for us to use. We cannot do that. So we have to beg the federal government for money. And now, are they benevolent and just give this money for free? No, they give it with strings attached to it. Heavy, heavy strings. Every year they get thicker and thicker and thicker. Strings like Common Core in our schools. Why does a little town, a little county out in the middle of nowhere in Idaho, why are they implementing in their school districts Common Core? It's because they took federal money, they agreed to federal memorandums of understandings, and therefore they took that money and they have to implement it. That's why we see it everywhere. That is what is happening. Why are we putting the federal government's use of force policies in our policing agencies? Why are our counties and our little cities implementing UN building codes in our little towns? It's because the federal government keeps borrowing money to us and saying, well, we'll give it to you if you do this and you do that and you do that. And we keep agreeing to it because we can't pay our own bills. Now, just one example, and then I'll jump from here. Because let's look. Idaho has the largest cobalt deposits in the United States, some of the most wealthy cobalt deposits in the world. But the federal government says that it belongs to them, even though it's inside of Idaho's boundaries. And they lease it to an Australian mining company who comes up here, makes billions of dollars, trillions maybe, but billions at least, I know. And they pay the federal government billions of dollars. And the people of Idaho don't get anything out of it, but maybe a few jobs. And then the people of Idaho have to go back to the federal government and say, hey, can we get some of that cobalt money? We can't pay our own bills. And they say, sure, but put Common Core in your schools. And that's what's happening in Idaho. So we must free Idaho from federal control. 4, and I've emphasized this again, but I do it a little different way, but that is make Idaho independent again. I think we see how we must be independent from the federal government. But what about each one of us? What about our independence? Because I look at Idaho as a place where people have this rugged independence, where they're not dependent on other people or dependent on the government. But did you know that, I got to remember this, almost $4 billion a year the government spends in welfare, state welfare. It's the largest percentage of our budget spent in welfare. It's almost 40% of our budget goes to welfare, human services, welfare, from the Department of Health and Welfare. And we know how they've treated us. So we must become independent ourselves. Yes. We must be able to trade freely, to be able to pay our own bills, and not become dependent on the government, because it's no different than the state of Idaho being dependent on the federal government. If you can't take care of yourselves, your children, if you can't pay your own bills, then you can't be free. You simply cannot be free. And there is a direct effort in Idaho, to make more people, the more Idahoans independent on the state, not less. There is a deliberate effort to do that. So We must make Idaho independent again. Number 5. Now there's only 8, so you don't have to go home. I'm getting close here. Number 5. Bring back the rule of law. This is something that's near and dear to my heart because I spent 2 years in federal prison, never convicted of even a misdemeanor. I watched my children and my wife and my brother's children and my brother's wives and my father and my mother. I watched them suffer while we were in federal prison being accused of crimes that didn't happen. And I am grateful that we were able to get out of that situation. In fact, if we hadn't got out of that, of course I wouldn't be here today. But I stand here because, not because I want to be governor. I've said that all over. It's not that I want to be governor, because to be honest with you, it's probably the worst thing I'll ever do in my life. But I stand here today because where much is given, much is expected. And I've been given freedom at the hands of God. He reached into those prisons, into those courtrooms, and he grabbed us out of there and took us right out. And I don't know why I'm so blessed to be able to do that. Because 98% of cases, 97% never go to trial. And 98% of that, 3% that go to trial, win in the federal courts. And we not only won once, but we won twice. The federal government spent $100 million prosecuting my family. And we spent 2 years in federal prisons, and half of that time is in solitary confinement. Never once was I able to have any physical contact with my wife or children the entire time. It was the worst time of my life. It was terrible. But I am so grateful I went through it. Because I know what the hand of God looks like. I know what it looks like. I know what it feels like. And I know that when you are saved by the hand of God, He does it for a reason. And that where much is given, much is expected. And that's why I stand here today. And I know, my friends, I know that we must correct the rule of law. Because I'll tell you just a simple little reason why. When I was sitting in solitary confinement, months on ends, I wanted to see my wife so bad. I wanted to see my children. But there was something even greater that I wanted, that my soul longed for. And that was justice. And if there is not a God who cannot bring justice eternally, then I don't want to exist, because that means the wicked just wins every time. And it is the same with the state. It is the duty of the state. It is the duty of the people to bring justice, to do the best they can to protect themselves from criminals, both street and government criminals. And it is our duty to bring justice. And what is justice? Justice is making the wrong right. That's what justice is. And so, number 5 is bring back the rule of law. Number 6, make Idaho an economic powerhouse. Why not, right? They don't call this the Treasure Valley for nothing. They don't call us the Gem State for nothing. Is that because we're poor? We got to borrow money from the federal government? No. We are resource rich. We are people that like to work. We have ideas. We know that we can trade with each other. There is no reason why Idaho cannot be an economic powerhouse. I believe the way to do that is just get the government out of the way. The people will do it themselves. Get them out of the way. Number 7. Secure the quality of life for every Idaho family. Does that sound good? I mean, Again, what does the Declaration of Independence say the purpose of government is? It is there to secure the rights of each person, the life, the liberty, and the pursuit of happiness of each person. To make sure that they can go throughout their day and not be harmed. To make sure that their fruits of their labor stays in their own pocket and not the hands of some other person or some other entity. To make sure that the people of Idaho are protected from the world, from the global agenda, from the federal government if necessary, and even from your street criminal down the street. That's the duty of the state. And so it is important to secure the quality of life for every Idahoan. Number 8 and final. Make Idaho an example of peace and prosperity to the rest of the world. Boy, don't we need that? The world needs an example of what freedom can give a people. And why not? While we're enjoying it, while we're being blessed by it, while we're prospering, while we're living in peace and tranquility, while we're implementing the principles of freedom that our founders implemented, that caused this nation to be the greatest nation ever in the written history of man, all we've got to do is apply those. And if we do that, the rest of the world will keep an eye on us. They will watch us. And they'll say, why don't we do the same thing? Why don't we follow Idaho's example? And maybe we can spark the spark of liberty. Maybe we can light the spark of liberty again throughout the world. It's been done before. It's what our founders did. And I believe it is our duty here in Idaho to do it. And I believe we have the people to do it. We have the ideas to do it. We have the ability to do it. And I believe we must do it. I believe we must do it. Because where we go if we don't? So I'm asking you, before you leave here today, go get a yard sign. You want to have a good conversation with your neighbors? All you got to do is put one in your front yard. Go to votebundy.com and subscribe to our email list, because we're going to send you information, and you're going to send that information out. And when you push that button, I know it's going to be a lot of anxiety. You're going to be like, oh, you got all your contacts in there, and I got a video that I want them to see, and you're going to hit it, and you're going to go, oh man, I'm going to get a lot of feedback on that. But you're going to do it because, why? Because the rest of the world needs an example. Because we need to put forth the Keep Idaho plan here in Idaho. And people need to make a choice. They need to have that choice. If you don't do it, they don't have the choice. They're just being conned by these people who have had control of the state for the last 40 years. You need to be the one to give them a choice. And you do that by putting a yard sign on your front yard, by forwarding the messages that we send to you. You also do that by contributing to our campaign, because we're going around and doing this thing just like this. We're doing this all over. And people are seeing that what the media has been saying about me is not true. And they're also seeing that I have a plan. And this plan will bring prosperity and happiness for people all over the world if they'll implement it. And it's not a complicated plan. So here we are in Idaho, beautiful Idaho, coming into heavy election season. And I am here giving you a choice. I love Idaho. It is my home. I've been here for a little over 7 years. I do not intend leaving Idaho. And I do not intend living here under oppression, under tyranny. I do not intend my children living here without freedom. And so, however that happens, it must happen. And that's the same for you and I. But what is the better, easier way? Is it not to get control of the state government and getting it doing the things that it was instituted to do from the beginning? There's a saying that says, socialism, this is socialism. You vote your way in and you shoot your way out. I don't want to do that, my friends. I do not want to do that. So we must use this time, we must use this election right now so that we can get control of the state government. We can get it back serving the people rather than serving those that are in control of it. And if we do that, our children and our children's children will be able to live in freedom and peace and prosperity in Idaho if they're willing to do the same thing. So let's do it. Let's do this. How about we do this? Can we do this? Let's do this. Go talk to your neighbors. Do the things that I've asked you to do here today. And let's keep Idaho, Idaho. Thank you.